Good morning, afternoon, and evening all. This is your key with episode 6 of my Sit and Chat series. It's a series that I haven't done an episode for a very long time. September was the last time I did an episode for this, and basically I've now had a very good excuse to do one, and also find the time to do one as well. And the good excuse is the FIA have released a statement containing the rule changes that they're planning on bringing for 2014, and one that will also come in effect for 2015 as well. Now, if you haven't seen these regulation changes already, I'm basically just going to walk through those changes and give my thoughts and opinions on them. And also, hopefully you guys can give your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below as well, and we can get a good discussion going, as I'd love to hear what you guys think about these changes and whether you actually agree with me or not. So, jumping straight in with the very first one, which is something that's actually going to come into effect the soonest, which is the Pirelli tyre test in Bahrain, which is happening on the 17th till the 19th of December 2013. Now, this is with the 2013 spec cars, and I believe it's going to be with the 2014 spec Pirelli tyres. All teams have been invited to this Pirelli test as well, but only 6 teams at the moment have accepted that invite, and those teams are Red Bull Racing, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Force India and Toro Rosso. And this is obviously, they're doing this on the grounds of safety. They did plan on doing a 2014 Pirelli tyre test in FP1 and FP2 of Brazil, and the tyres were there for the teams to use if they chose to. However, due to the mixed conditions with some quite large amounts of rain, the teams mostly ran the intermediate and wet and didn't really want to risk the car out on slick tyres, on tyres that they've never used before. So they did no running on the 2014 spec tyres. So they're doing them, or the FIA have allowed them, Pirelli, to host this test. Something that is potentially very, very good, but also does have some negatives. The good thing is, obviously, they need to get this test in, because we don't want a repeat of early 2013 with tyres delaminating and most noticeably exploding in Silverstone, like they did before they switched back to the 2014 spec. So this will provide very valuable data for Pirelli and give them some good feedback on strengthening and also the safety of the construction of the compounds. So it'll be good to see what results coming from those. Obviously it has a negative as well, because at the moment only 6 teams have accepted. Obviously, like I said, all teams have been invited, however just the 6 have accepted, and those 6 teams, funnily enough, are the top 6 constructors from the 2013 season. And you can probably see where this is going, and that issue is money. Obviously not all teams may have the money to get their cars and obviously a decent number of engineers and the drivers out to this Pirelli test for these 3 days. They may not be able to afford it, so they're going to lose out on some very valuable data, because I imagine Pirelli are actually going to allow the teams to take some of this tyre data to use themselves, and this data could become very useful. Obviously they're running their 2013 cars, but they can apply this tyre data into their 2014 simulations, where they already have the data for their own cars, with like engine and aerodynamics and all that sort of thing from their wind tunnel testing and dyno testing that they're probably doing in-house in their factories. They can apply that to their simulation package and basically get a much better sense of where their car is at on their own performance sort of standings. Obviously the teams who don't go are going to miss out on this and are immediately going to be on quite a relatively big advantage when they come round to Jerez, and also possibly the first couple of rounds of the 2014 calendar as well. So this is quite a nice addition, and it'd be great if all teams do go there. However, it does have its drawbacks if only those 6 teams that have currently accepted, we've got another 5 to accept, only if they go. So hopefully we'll be able to see the other teams there if they can fork out a bit of cash to do that. Carrying on with the kind of the money concept, another thing that they're planning on bringing This is actually for 2015. It's not coming in effect for 2014, and that is a cost cap. They're basically planning on limiting the global cost cap that across all teams for a season. They have a June deadline to come up with a fixed number for all teams, and also basically how they're going to police this cost cap, because they have tried doing it in the past before, but it hasn't really worked. So they left the teams to kind of police it themselves. But obviously they need something a bit more external to do that and make sure that all teams aren't breaking this rule regulation. So they've got a June deadline date to get this done by, and it's not coming into effect until January 2015. So this again has both positives and negatives. Positives being it should hopefully tighten up the field. Obviously the big teams with loads of money such as Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren and Red Bull are hopefully spending about the same amount of money that they're spending as Caterham and Marussia, the teams who don't have quite as much money. Should hopefully close that gap and also hopefully tighten the field up in performance as well. However, it has a negative in the way of basically we could have a repeat of the second half of the season. That being, one team could potentially hit all the nails on the head with R&D and performance of their car throughout the entirety of the season, and by the time they get to their cost cap, they have basically a fantastic car that is miles ahead in performance compared to the rest of the field when they reach their cost caps. And obviously we're not going to see that gap close throughout the rest of the season if other teams have reached their cost cap. We're just going to have to stick with it throughout the rest of the season. The teams are going to have to do it as well, which could really suck and could potentially lose out on some great title races. It's kind of in a repeat of 2013 in the way that obviously Red Bull kind of ran away with the title in the second half of the season, and I think that's mainly down to teams shifting their focus onto the 2014 development earlier than Red Bull, and also obviously the 2012 tyre spec coming back into use midway through the 2013 season for safety reasons. So that is my worry about this cost cap, is that teams won't be able to catch up and close that development gap later on in the season if one team does a runaway and all teams have hit their cost cap. So the teams are going to have to spend their money wisely and basically really focus on certain areas. It does. One thing I'm actually very happy about with this cost cap is they're not planning on bringing it for the 2014 season. Obviously, with the 2014 new rules and changes, especially the different engines switching from the V8s to the V6s, we're going to probably have some major reliability issues towards the start of the season, which should spice up the racing a little bit. But obviously with cost cap in effect at those times as well, it's going to make it a lot harder for the teams to manage their money. Obviously they're going to put some money to one side to basically cover reliability costs, but then that means sacrificing some of that money that they could use in R&D and developing the car further. So it has its positives and negatives. It'll certainly be interesting to see when it actually comes into effect in 2015. Hopefully it doesn't impact the sport too much, and hopefully it will basically do what it's set out to do. The next regulation change that I'm going to talk about are driver numbers. This has been on a topic for the last couple of weeks now, and that driver numbers will be choose their race number between 2 and 99 for the entire duration of their career in Formula 1. Obviously the number 1 slot will be reserved for the current world champion, or the champion from basically the person who won the previous championship. But even then, they get a choice as to whether they want to use the number 1 on their car, or whether they want to keep their own number that they chose. If 2 drivers pick the same number, priority goes to the person who finished higher up in the standings in the previous championship. So this is actually something that I'm quite pleased to see. It's very much more of a cosmetic thing. Obviously NASCAR do it with their teams rather than drivers, and obviously MotoGP do it with their riders. Valentino Rossi having the the iconic 43, and also they actually used to have this in F1. I believe it was mid 90s that they changed it. Prior to that, obviously we had the iconic number 5 for like Nigel Mansell. So it should be good for like future purposes, and it also helps with us as well. We don't have to relearn the driver numbers where the teams basically finish in different constructors positions, and also drivers changing around teams. We don't have to relearn those. Those will stay stagnant throughout the entire duration of that person's career, which is good. And hopefully it'll be nice to see this with larger numbers on cars, but obviously that's probably not going to happen, as the teams like to keep as much space on the cars for sponsorship purposes, basically as much as possible. So whether we actually see bigger numbers, I doubt it, but hopefully it'll work in alongside with the driver helmets, and then we could see some funky designs with big numbers on the side of driver helmets and that sort of thing. So this is something that is it's more of a cosmetic thing, but it's something quite cool. The next regulation change that they had were the new penalties, and this is basically they're planning on implementing a 5-second penalty, which is something that they've been needing for quite some time. Up until now, the smallest penalty they had that they can give during a race is a drive-through penalty, which can be very, very harsh for minor infringements, things such as what's his name, Felipe Massa's crossing the cross-hatching on the pit entry in Brazil at the final race of the 2013 season. Something as small as that, even though they were told not to do it prior to the race in the driver's briefing. Obviously he only did it like once or twice, and he got a drive-through penalty in it, from it. He was 14th at the time, and it kind of ruined the battle between Felipe Massa and Lewis Hamilton, who was close behind, and it ruined his race quite considerably, as I believe he ended up in 7th at the end of the race. So they've been needing something smaller that they can give. A 5-second penalty will be perfect, as long as the stewards implement it and give it to the drivers in the right situation. Obviously it's great for a spectator standpoint, as the battles can carry on rather than the driver having to go and drive through the pits and end the battle within 3 laps. So the battle can carry on. Obviously the drivers and the teams can work out a strategy to then cover off that 5-second penalty if they do get given that, and it can make for some more tense moments towards the end of the race as well, trying to see if drivers can actually get that 5-second gap, or hold it, or increase to get the gap. So it's something that they have been needing for a long time, and I'm actually very, very glad to see being implemented. The last thing that they are planning on bringing, and this is something that I'm pretty much against, and a lot of other people are against it as well, and that is double drivers and constructors points for the final race of the season. Why they're doing this, I'm not entirely sure. As Martin Brundle put it, it's an answer to a question that isn't being asked. It's something that's come out completely out of the blue. The FIA have said they wanted to do it because they want to keep the teams and drivers focused pretty much throughout the entire duration of the championship to the very last round, because obviously at the end of 2013 some drivers are probably they can see that they're being pushed further away from getting the title at the end of the race, and kind of giving up a few races towards the end. They're basically just trying to steer away from a repeat of the end of the 2013 season. So you can kind of see why in that sense, but at the same time it negates the rest of the calendar. All the other races kind of become as Sky Sports have said, a second tier to that race, The actual race, the final race for the 2014 season is Abu Dhabi as well, so it's not an overly great one. It's had a couple of decent races in the past, but otherwise most of the time it's not a particularly amazing circuit for overtaking and having great battles on. So it's an iffy one. It's something that I don't really want to see. I believe that these aren't actually fully in effect and that they are subject to potentially change. It's kind of like a final draft of the regulation changes that they're planning on doing. I think they said if there's a big enough uproar, or basically people are against a certain regulation, it has the potential to change. I think the points for the last race is probably the one that may change, or is the most likely to. I'm certainly hoping that it will. Obviously, it's just kind of, it negates the rest of the races, especially some of the, the bigger events. Kind of makes them redundant. Places like Monaco, Silverstone, Spa, Monza, just to name a few. Some of those races that people really look forward to. It takes away some of the, the uniqueness of those races. And actually, Sky Sports have also said about this. They've calculated that only 3 of the last 20 driver championships would have ended differently if this regulation was in fact for the past 20 years. So only 3 of those driver championships would have been different. So it's very much nullified in that sense. And there's actually some championships in the past that would have obviously ended differently as well. We wouldn't have had the great, the Massa and Hamilton, when Hamilton won his Drivers' World Championship, and Massa was the champion for about 15 seconds before Hamilton managed to take, I believe it was 5th position, which is all he needed to win the championship. And if this rule had been in effect then, obviously Massa would have won it. Same again with last year. I believe Alonso would have won instead of Sebastian Vettel, if this was the case. And yeah, I am on the fence about it. It's like you can kind of see why it could be good in some situations, depending on how the season turns out. But at the same time, why do it just for the last one in a track that isn't as great as it could be? And I would have preferred it if it wasn't there entirely, and the points were just even across the entire duration of the season. The team's focus should be obviously on the championship anyway. If they're planning on bringing a cost cap into the 2015 season, this is something that I've just thought of. This is probably going to just full on negate this. Obviously, the teams are going to obviously want to get in as much money into the 2015 cars before that cost cap comes into effect. So the teams are probably going to end up shifting their development focus away from the 2014 cars before the end of the season anyway. So it's it's got 2 sides to it, and it's something that I'm not keen on, as you can probably tell. But anyway, those are the FIA changes that they're planning on bringing for 2014-2015 as well. Those are my thoughts and opinions on them. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Just come up with something like a different solution or a slight alternative, or what you may think may or may not work with those regulation changes. It'd just be good to get some sort of discussion going between multiple people, and obviously express your opinions on it as well, because I'm pretty sure you guys are looking to give your say. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this, guys. Hopefully I'll be able to continue this in the future as well. Hopefully I'll be able to find more time for it. But otherwise, yeah, thank you very much. I hope to see you soon. Take care.